Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for the wait. As announced in the 2021-2022 revised national budget, the government had announced that we'll be providing a one-off unemployment support of $100 to the people in Vanuatu. As you know that if you look at Head 50, there's an allocation of $13 million was made for that. The application will actually open from tomorrow, 26th of May, at 9 a.m. and close on the 31st of May, which is open for 5 days at 5 p.m. Again, the same requirements are there. Eligible individuals have to be 18 years and over. In Vanuatu only, can apply by dialing *161# and provide all the following mandatory information: your full name, birth registration number, or citizenship number, date of birth, TIN, tax identification number, FNPF number, voter identification number, home address, declaration to confirm the applicant has received both jabs of COVID-19. If yes, of course, provide the place of vaccination, consent for the Fijian government to access applicants' vaccination and SIM card registration details, and the statutory declaration to confirm that all information provided is correct. As you know that this takes about 3 minutes or less to do so. Individual, of course, again, whose employment income has not been affected, as well as those who receive other forms of government assistance, are not eligible for this income support as was previously done. This, of course, includes all civil servants, other employees in the private sector and statutory bodies whose employment income has not been affected and currently are working now, and therefore the FNPF contributions have been normal in the last 1 month. All those on the FNPF pension scheme, all students on TELS and Topper scholarship receiving normal allowances, all social welfare recipients, and all those, of course, below the age of 18 years. It is important that individuals applying for this assistance gather all of the required information before dialing *161#. It's quite easy once you've got all the information. Incomplete submissions or submissions containing incorrect information will not be considered. Only one registered SIM card is permitted per person, as we've seen in the past. Sometimes people get 2 SIM cards. And the one SIM card should be registered under the applicant's name itself. Qualifying applicants must be fully vaccinated with at least the first 2 jabs. There are stiff penalties for individuals, of course, attempting to double dip on government unemployment assistance. Payment for qualifying applicants will start from 6 June 2022, subject to correct and complete information being provided. So that's about 5 days after the applications close. Ministry of Economy, of course, will work with in partnership with various organizations, including Vodafone, Digicel, Ministry of Communication, Ministry of Health and Medical Services, Ministry of Women, Children, Poverty Alleviation, FRCS, FNPF, and the Tertiary Scholarship and Loans Board to verify and process the applications. For ease of access, of course, funds will be deposited directly into the M-Pesa or the MyCash accounts for successful recipients. We had also announced in the budget that we'll be making one-off payments to all those who currently are social welfare recipients. You know, people receiving any form of cash. For example, rural pregnant women, people on social pension, other forms of poverty alleviation. All of them will receive a one-off payment of $50 in the first week of June. In 2022, of course, the additional $50 will be added to the normal monthly welfare payments. The payment will be made directly to the recipient's bank account or digital wallet, whichever way they are currently being paid. That's how they'll get that additional $50. For them, of course, they don't need to apply because they're already on the list. They're already social welfare recipients, so they'll get that money paid. So we urge you as members of the media to also spread this information. This information will be going up practically as we speak. It will be going up on our Facebook page. There will be various radio announcements made to this effect also. We urge all people in Vanuatu to apply for this. We had allocated $13 million for the $100 one-off payment and $7 million for the $50 one-off payment, which should be adequate enough to ensure all those who are eligible actually will get those monies that they're entitled to. Thank you. Any questions?
So just to clarify, what is the number that people have to give their details?
It's *161#. tag, as it was previously.
So this in regards to those that, during the lockdown working in the university, so from has returned to what's the process in regards to this?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very interesting question. They are originally from Vanuatu. So one can argue and say that they're eligible for it because they live in Vanuatu. On the other hand, one could say that they've already received their 2 rounds of 360 because they're considered to be people in Viti level. And as you know, with the 360, that was only eligible for people in Viti level. So it's an ethical issue. We urge those people who already received 360, please don't do so. But there's not that many people. There's not that many people, so it's not going to break the bank. But it may break a more ethical code, but may not break the bank.
Good evening, sir. Sir, I've got 2 questions. One is we have seen individuals announced as provisional candidates who are engaging in various fundraising.
Sir, can I just address questions on this? Any questions on this? Anything on this announcement? Yes, no? Okay, yeah, please go ahead.
So we have seen individuals announced as provisional candidates engaging in various fundraising activities, but doing so without the party logo. We would like to get a comment on this.
Yeah, in fact, it was brought to our attention yesterday that happened too, where we have individuals who've been announced as candidates for respective political parties, and they're going around doing fundraising. And people were commenting saying that, oh, it's okay that they can do that. It's actually not okay. Under laws, as you know, the campaign period has already started, so various laws do apply. If you have been announced as a candidate, you're collecting funds, or even indeed any individual that's collecting funds for election or campaign purposes, they have to adhere to the law. We do not expect people to go out using other political parties' names. We've seen a couple of years ago, we had somebody who put up the Fiji First banner and said, I'm the youth rep, and started collecting money from people, and we reported that person to the police. Similarly, there are people we've seen on social media. We are carefully studying that, of course, and it's unfair that people do that. So just because they don't have a logo, but it's been publicly announced that they're a candidate, or even if they have not been announced as a candidate but are doing fundraising for any political party, it's illegal to do so without adhering to all the rules that are required. You need to have separate bank accounts. You need to be held accountable for all those funds. People need to know where those funds are going. And of course, if people are not accountable, you could actually have businesses that could give money. And that's how you kind of, clean money. In fact, it is, from a technical perspective, dirty money in the sense that businesses aren't supposed to contribute to political party. This is why, when people do logo packs and lamb chop night or whatever it is, there is no account for it. Every single dollar that is collected by a candidate or any political party must be accounted for. And you must know the source of funds. Because if you're going to have all these katis and, logo pack nights and lamb curry nights or whatever it is, or gos fulia, etc., you need to record every single person that's bought a parcel or a roti parcel, whatever it is, because they are actually contributing. So they're actually donating to the party. And how do you know it's not one person who's just allocated $10,000 from his shop and saying, look, I bought 100 packs, and that's illegal. They should not do that. And of course, we are recently it's been brought to our attention, in fact yesterday, so we're keeping tabs. There's a number of other things that we've seen. I just received a recording. This morning of some people campaigning and basically telling lies, saying that there is no government tenders been called government does not call tenders and just gives it to anybody they like. I mean, that's a lie. I understand that the chair of the government tender committee has made a statement, but it's also a breach of the laws. You cannot make those kind of allegations without any facts. So unfortunately, this one particular recording we received was in a remote rural area. So, some people may not necessarily have access to information. So here are people standing up there and campaigning and essentially telling lies. So we are looking at the legal avenues available to have some corrective measures put in place. Similarly, it's been brought to our attention even early this morning that certain political parties or their leaders are announcing on Facebook about they'll be doing X, Y, Z. But they're not saying where they'll get the funding from. And that's a breach of the Financial Management Act. You're supposed to say, you say you're going to put 2 hospitals, you need to say, well, how much is it going to cost? And how will you fund it? It's a very basic issue. And unfortunately, a couple of them are still doing that. So again, we're looking at our legal options. We'll be studying that, and hope, if there is, we believe, any breach, we'll report it to the relevant authorities. Because we need to have clean elections, and unfortunately, these people aren't.
So you mentioned about the allegations against government. Is this by any chance Mr. Harun Ali Shah, who's been alleging that government's tender process is not so transparent? And if you could just elaborate a little.
Well, he did not say it's not so transparent. He said there's no tenders call. He said that whoever we know that gets the government tender. Yeah, that is his recording that we received this morning.
And just my second question, sir, is there any update on the PCN applications for those who allegedly robbed of their money for paying it for PCN and the work was not done? And I understand the application process for refund ended last week Friday. Would you be able to give us an update on that?
Well, as you know, there was an earlier date and we've extended that because we've had people who've come to us and saying, look, I'll receipt my uncle or my dad taken to the village and we need to go and relocate it. So we've given people more time. But a lot of people have applied. It won't be prudent for me to say, that this many people will get it next week because we have to do a verification process. As you know, some people also make fake receipts too. So we have to go through the verification process. And as you know, we made a couple of $1 million available for that particular purpose. So we would like to urge anybody that has not applied, if you haven't, the date may have closed, but you can still send it in because the extension still stands. My understanding is that. But those who have applied, please just be patient. We're going to go through the verification process and then do the refunds.
Sir, the Electoral Commission announced today that the earliest that the writ for the elections could be issued is tomorrow. As the minister responsible for elections, has there been any discussion on a possible election date?
Please don't get it all confused. The Minister for Election, responsible for elections, does not run the Electoral Commission, nor does he run the Fijian Elections Office, nor does being Minister for Responsible mean that we conduct the elections. It's essentially to do with the laws. That's what it is. So I think there's a confusion. You'll be confusing your readers or your listeners or your viewers, whichever media organization you represent. But the writ of elections, obviously the election date is a prerogative of the Honourable Prime Minister. So he, as you know, as previously done, he will choose a date. He will then visit His Excellency the President, who then issues the writ. The day the writ is issued, including that day, on the 45th day the election is held. That's how it works. It's quite clear. If you go to the Fijian elections page or that app they have, you'll see it all set out. If the writ is issued tomorrow, what day the election will fall, when are the nominations, when do the nominations close, when is pre-polling, all of that is set out. It's very clear. The information is available, so you can go and read that. But as you know also, we've always said that the election should be held on a Wednesday. So you can do your calculations. So obviously if the writ is going to be issued tomorrow, then the election will be held on a Saturday, which is from memory, the 9th of July, I think. But that does not fit in. So we've, as a policy, we've said it should be held on a Wednesday because it's a paid public holiday. We like everybody to go and vote. It's not on a Wednesday because if you have a paid public holiday on a Tuesday, some people may take Monday off and have a long weekend and go somewhere else. If you have an election on a Monday, people may still go off somewhere else. Or if you have a election on a Thursday, and they may take Friday off. So that's why it's done in the middle of the week, to get as many people as possible to go and vote. It takes only 15 minutes or so to do so, and there are a number of polling stations available. But the election date is the prerogative of the Honourable Prime Minister.
Just one more question, sir. We understand the Australian Foreign Minister, Penny Wong, will arrive tomorrow, and the Chinese Foreign Minister will also be visiting. Was this a meeting planned?
You mean whether they talk to each other? You have to ask them. We have no clue about whether they talk to each other or not. They're visiting Fiji individually in their own right.
So the People's Alliance leader, Sidney Ramboka, has made some comments regarding water cuts and power outages. He says that the inability to keep lights on and water flowing is an indictment of yours and the Prime Minister's leadership, and that you should not remain in office. We just want to get comments on that.
Do you know the track record of the water outages and the number of people who did not get reticulated water systems and weren't connected to electricity when Sitiveni Rambuka was the Prime Minister from 87 decree-led governance, or when he became Prime Minister from 1992 to 1999? Please go and do your maths and your homework, and then you'll see whether he indeed should have been the Prime Minister, and whether, if under his leadership he lost the national bank that we had, which is one of the largest banks in Fiji, under his leadership he lost it, should have been fit to continue as Prime Minister. The electricity did go off in the past couple of days. There are technical issues that did happen. It's not an indictment of how the Prime Minister or the Attorney-General is running EFL or running the switch at Monasavu. It's quite a stupid comment to make, actually, frankly.
Sir, Mr. Bpo Prasad, during your town session in Kolkata, you mentioned that every Fijian has a $10,000 debt on their head, using our total debt versus our total population. So this is quite a serious accusation to make. I'd like to get your response to that.
Biman Prasad is also the one who said that the poverty level in Fiji is 50%. Can you rely on somebody who's changing and chopping figures and pulling figures out from whatever part of his anatomy he does do so? Pulling 50% out from nowhere when the World Bank is actually saying it's 24.1%. As we've said continuously, is that when you look at debt, you don't just look at the nominal value of the debt. If you look at the debt levels, the nominal value of debt in USA and Canada and wherever and various other places, the debt per capita will be very high, extremely high, notwithstanding the fact they have larger population numbers. It's your ability to pay your debt, it's your ability to understand what the debt is being used for, and also the cost of the debt. As we've explained numerous times, if this lady over here who's got her hand on her face, if she wants to go and borrow $100,000 tomorrow, and she goes, for example, to BSP, and they lend to her at 10% and say you pay us within 3 years, and then you go and borrow at $100,000 and you go to HFC, and they say, great, we'll give you the $100,000, you pay it over 30 years with a 10-year grace period, and your interest rate is 1%. Both of you have borrowed $100,000. And if you want to do the calculation that he's trying to do, even though I would not trust those figures, even if you did that, who has a bigger debt burden? She has, obviously. She's paying 10% interest rate. She has to pay the full debt within 3 years. So she has to do something really quick, smart to be able to pay that debt within 3 years. You have 30 years to pay. You have 1% interest rate to pay. You have a 10-year grace period. So if you're investing in a business, within 10 years you'll be able to make your money, increase your productivity, and be able to service the debt. And in our case, as we've said and shouted from the rooftops numerous times, that in the past 2 years we've got $900 million at concessional financing. The Japanese have lent to us at 0.01%, 40-year term, 10-year grace period. By the time you pay that amount of money that you borrowed at 0.01%, you end up paying only 40% because 60% becomes like a grant. Because the interest rate is 0.01%, you take inflation into account and you have a 10-year grace period, so you actually end up paying only 40% of what you borrowed. Similarly, the World Bank has lent to us at 0% interest rate, at 0.75% service fee. Again, the grant element works out to be about 55%. So these people aren't being honest. And I think, again, one of the failures of these political parties has been, in particular NFP, and of course PAPI, because the inability to announce what their specific policies are. They have not made any policy announcements whatsoever. nor have they said what would they have done, for example. So if, for example, if they're saying we should not have borrowed, that means all the unemployment benefit that we paid out would not have been paid out. So the people in Fiji would have been dying of starvation. 110,000 people would not have received any unemployment benefit. For the first time, informal sector received 2 rounds of 360, 2 rounds of 50, $90. And who are the people mainly in the informal sector who work? Women. The lady who sells boiled evi, lovo packs, mitai, whatever it is. They're the people who are affected. The lady who sells handicraft in a hotel, you go to the Outrigger or other hotels, you see some lady in a corner making, necklaces and carving out. She's not employed by them. She actually works for herself. She did not have a job or a livelihood for 2 years. So there's absolutely nothing wrong in actually helping her. And if your revenue has been shot overnight, which you did not plan for, the borders shut down throughout the world, and your revenue shut down, your GDP value, nominal value has come down, and they don't tell you that, right? So on one hand, your revenues come down, but the value of your GDP has come down. So when you measure debt to GDP ratio, obviously it'll be higher. But the moment your GDP value goes up, your debt to GDP ratio will come lower. The same way, let's use you two again. If this lady goes out and borrows $20, but her income is $100, you'll say, to simplify it, her debt to GDP ratio is 20%. You go and borrow double the amount, in fact 2.5 times the amount, you go and borrow $50. But your income is $500, your debt to GDP ratio is 10%. Even though the amount of money you borrowed is more than what she's borrowed. So you have to take a more sophisticated, a more nuanced approach to these things, and unfortunately these politicians are simply going out trying to create fear amongst people, amongst the young people. When there's certain infrastructure projects, like we talk about electricity, we talk about roads, water, reticulated systems, connecting people, you're increasing the productive capacity. If you're building a 4-lane road now from Nandi Airport to Namaka, Matintar, etc., you as a young person, or the person who's now 19 years old, does not have to build it because it's already been built. And the cost of building it today will be far more cheaper than building it in 10 years' time. And when we're building these things, if you look at that 4-lane road, there's nothing overhead. Costs us about $20 million more to put all the electrical and the telecom cables underground. Next time there's a cyclone, there's nothing to blow down. The water pipes that are going to be laid in 5 years' time actually have been laid in now to take account of the capacity that's required when the population is growing. So you see, you need to sort of be honest in terms of your analysis, and as journalists also you need to do the same too, and be able to ask those questions as opposed to just sort of people standing up and pontificating without necessarily any facts and figures.
So just quite quickly, regarding the IMF Deputy Managing Director's visit, his meeting with the RBF governor has been labeled as a fruitful one. We had a lot of discussion about global inflation, and he said that he made suggestions on how government can continue to go down on a sustainable debt level path in ensuring payment keeps is on par as well. Would you be able to tell us how government plans, or will government consider the suggestions that were made by the IMF in terms of to cushion global inflation as it will continue, and also help Fijians down?
So you've got a number of elements in your question. When you're talking about inflation, you're talking about debt, you're also talking about growth, essentially. And if you listen to what the Deputy Managing Director of IMF said, he essentially said that if you have growth, you're in a good path, essentially. Countries have all increased debt. New Zealand's debt to GDP ratio is about 22 or 24% before COVID. Now it's about 42 or 44%. Even a country like New Zealand, that traditionally had very low debt to GDP levels. Even countries like Australia have almost double or thereabouts. So it's not something peculiar to Fiji. The entire world was actually, shut down. So it has a huge impact. But the most important thing is how are you able to negotiate out of your way from the pandemic. So we were criticized, for example, for some people, not everybody, criticized us for having no jab, no job policy. If in fact that was not put in place, we would not be in the same kind of economic position we are today. We would have been far worse off. It's not only about keeping ourselves safe, it's about how other people view you. If our vaccination rate was very low, do you think the Australians and Kiwis and Americans would want to come to Fiji? Of course not. they'll see you as a high health risk, and they would not come. So you see, these are the things, measures we put in place, and he has been quite appreciative of many of the things that we've done. And they would like the continuity of the policies that we have in place. As you know, also before the pandemic, but more so now, of course, is that we've been looking at diversification of our economy. One sector that grew 3,000 jobs during the pandemic was the BPO sector. If you look in the budget, we've allocated $200,000 to the BPO Council. Outsource Fiji, as you know, is there. It's creating jobs. 3,000 jobs were created. They don't get affected by, for example, where the tourism numbers come and go. There's service outside. When there's a cyclone, they still need to continue with the services. The Australians are actually working with us in that respect. They've also funded the BPO Council. One of the consultants has said there's a potential to have 100,000 jobs in that sector. We have a young population. 70% of the population is below the age of 40. If you look at the BPO sector, at the moment it's predominantly a lot of women work there, and between the ages of 19 and 33. So a lot of opportunities and employment opportunities, and we've been sort of fostering that, engendering that. And a lot of it has come on the back of the fact that we've invested in infrastructure and telecommunications. So you've got the next gen cable there. We've got now a submarine cable that's landed in Savu. Telecom is looking at doing a fiber optic cable from Savu to Lambasa, sorry. And there's an opportunity to have actually BPO set up in Vanua Level 2. We are currently looking at some measures to try and entice businesses to actually go to Vanua Level for BPO. There's a lot of real estate there. We want the Vanua Level people to stay in Vanua Level. We want like to send people from Viti Level to Vanua Level. So, those are the things that we're looking at. We discussed a number of those issues as to what we're doing in terms of growing the economy and making sure that we have, continuously we are looking at new opportunities and to take advantage of our geographical location too. The connectivity, Fiji Airways is critically important. Most Pacific Islanders, for them to get out of the Pacific, they have to come to Fiji. As you've seen that in the budget recently announced, now you can stay up to 4 or 5 days without having to pay departure tax. So Fiji is using it as a transit hub. If you look at Fiji Airways, some of the bookings now, a lot of Australians who are traveling to USA are using Fiji Airways, using Nandi as a stopover. So there's a number of things that are happening in that respect. So, it's given a lot of confidence. We, of course, have to make sure that we stick to our, medium-term debt strategy. Again, it's available on our webpage. Go and read it. Everything is there. This entire book that I'm reading to you from is there on the webpage. Our policy announcement on that is all available there. So, all those things are happening. The other thing you talked about was inflation. As you know, that there are two types of inflation. One is domestic inflation. The other is, foreign inflation. There's certain inflationary impact at the moment the entire world is going through. And as we highlighted in Parliament, inflation rate in USA is about over 7%. Some other countries, but it's interesting. Countries like Japan, the inflation rate is fairly low. It's about 1%, but most of the countries are 6-7% or so. We were sitting around about 3.5 to 4%. Most of the foods we actually buy, everything that you are wearing or have on yourself is imported. Even the clothes on your back is imported. The fabric may be sewn here, stitched here, but it's all imported. Our cars, this video, everything is imported. So. It will have an inflationary impact. Prior to the Ukraine-Russia war, there is, the freight costs went significantly high. A container that prior to pandemic cost about $5,500 from Auckland to Fiji was about $5,500. Now it's about $16,500. There's a shortage of containers. China is still on a lockdown. China is the largest manufacturer in the world. So when you're the largest manufacturer with the port shut, there's a lot of containers that are stuck there. They cannot get out, so there's a supply and demand issue. So all those factors are there. I mean, there's some talk about those who predict these things, and we read and we talk to shipping companies. There was at one stage, the prediction that around about September, October, the cost of freight should reduce. And of course, thrown amidst all of this has been the Russia-Ukraine war. Not many people knew that in that region they have 30% of the world's wheat supply. There are actually bread riots in places like Egypt at the moment. If you read the recent article, a lot of those countries that are very heavily dependent because they don't necessarily grow the wheat themselves, there's bread riots. People want the bread. India has now stopped exporting all their wheat. They just want to look after themselves. So they say, we don't want to export any more wheat. So countries are urging them now to export wheat because the overall world market supply of wheat has, diminished. So that obviously will put pressure on the price of wheat. In the same way, you have gas pipelines running from Russia to Germany and Finland and various other places where the supply chain has been stopped, either because of economic or trade bans or whatever the case has been. So it does have an inflationary impact. A lot of these things are beyond our control. What we can control is, that we had anticipated a lot of this. Some had already started happening, was to do things like remove VAT on 21 items. Of course, if we had not removed VAT on 21 items, you'd be paying 9% more at the moment. So at least that 9% has been removed. And there's obviously other measures, things like, for example, the one-off $50 payment to those people on social welfare, benefits. They have some additional funding. So those things are the measures. Of course, depending when the election will be held. I mean, election can be held any time, but if the election is not held anytime soon, then we still have to prepare for a budget too. So at the moment, we'll see what happens. But as far as the inflation is concerned, and again, oil. Russia is the third or fourth largest producer in the world. Not many people knew that before this, war. So obviously, again, it's a short supply. USA has one of the largest reserves in the world. They had released some oil into the market, which we understand brought down some of their domestic costs, domestic pricing. As highlighted in Parliament at the moment, if you look at within the region, Australia is probably the cheapest. If you compare Fiji with Australia and New Zealand, we are cheaper than New Zealand at the moment per litre. We were at least until last week. So the cheapest is Australia, then Fiji, then New Zealand. New Zealand's a population of about 4.5 million people. We buy all our fuel from Singapore, the 3 fuel companies. They get all the fuel from Singapore. So I mean, those are the things out of control. But if the price of wheat continues to rise, then we may have to consider other things, like, for example, maybe not eating bread every day, but you're having cassava or dalo or uto. I mean, these are the things that we can control. And this is why, what Dr. Reddy had done, giving seedlings, even people growing stuff in the backyard, it does help. So, there's a number of measures. Of course, government will be looking at as to what we can do to be able to ensure that we navigate our way through this particular passage of time.
So this is in regards to the one-off assistance opening tomorrow in Honolulu. Considering that most part of the interior of Honolulu does not have access to the network, and especially for internet providers, what are other ways the ministry is looking at getting these citizens to register for the application?
You are right that there are some places, like in Viti Levu, that does not have connectivity. We were somewhere, I can't remember exactly, last week, down in Nawezomba, right up towards the end. You were there, right? Yes. So we talked about the connectivity, but a lot of the people, they travel a few kilometers up and then they get the connectivity. So in fact, you may recall that early this year or late last year, we went to Vanuatu. There are 40 sites where we've connected people to the phone, either through IP phones, but mainly internet. Schools, we connected through internet. And we've also announced they'll be very soon gazetted. We've identified over 300 sites that needs to be connected directly, so people have those levels of connectivity. We've got 3 phases in which it will be done. But those people, we've looked at those places. A lot of people still have mobile phones. So when we went to these places, people still had mobile phones because they were using it. Some had to travel a few more kilometers. So we will see how it goes. A lot of people at the moment, even to get better pricing on the fish or the dalo, they travel a few kilometers and they get connectivity, and then they're able to, get that ability to talk to people, etc. So we're hoping that they'll do that. We'll see how it pans out. And we'll obviously make sure that those people who do need to get the $100 will get it somehow or the other.